fits so well with where I want to go this morning. As we continue our teaching on Ephesians and the church there in Ephesus and how they got some instruction and how that applies to us. Worship team, great job. Thank you, Jen, for being just aware and in tune. It is just so cool when I come in with a certain set of things in my mind, and Jen and I have not talked at all this week about that, and the songs that are picked just line up exactly with where I'm at. Seeing the Lord work in those ways is really cool. So you guys, one thing that I'm gonna give you this, and then I'll tell you why. So I am learning that I don't need to filibuster for 10 minutes at the beginning to try and figure out if I can get to the end of the sermon or not. So I want to start diving into the content a lot faster without bringing like an abrupt, hey, grab something, get moving. So I hope you guys are good and warm because we've got some good places to get this morning, and I want to get there. So go ahead and grab your Bibles, and let's go to Ephesians 2. So last week, if you guys remember, Steve taught in Ephesians, kicked off our series that we're going to go through the church of Ephesus and the teachings in Ephesians, and he talked about identity. So stayed in chapter 1 mostly, and now today we're stepping over into Ephesians 2, and we're going to focus on salvation this morning. So we're going to talk about where it comes from, what they have in mind. Specifically, the first 10 verses of Ephesians 2 is where we're going to stay. But here's something that Steve talked about last week that he and I keep kind of bringing into our conversations as we talk about this teaching in Ephesians. So the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, they're a little tougher than the last 3. And the reason for that is just because of what most of us want to go towards. So it's a whole lot easier to grab something. If I say, grab a hold of this and do something differently, most of us are like, yep, no problem. You gave me an instruction. I can change something. No problem. That's pretty easy, at least for us guys. When you give us something to grab a hold of and say, don't do that, do this. That's a pretty easy thing to see. But the first 3 chapters, what it deals with is much more your heart, your desires, the things that come from the Lord, and not things that you can just, say, oh, I'm not in love with this, so I'm going to be in love with this. That's not how it works. I wish it was, but it's just not. And it's part of the design that he puts into the plan, and we get to understand and try and see what he's going after. So as we kind of keep talking about the teachings in Ephesians at that level, like resist the urge to say, so what do I need to change? Like, what do I need to grab a hold of and twist or just shake up a little bit in my life? Like, resist the urge, because that is where my heart goes so fast. Like, I want to walk away this morning with something that has handles that I can say, I'm going home and I did it this way, and now after today, I'm doing it this way. We're going to put some handles on a few things today, but it may not be as easy to grip or as normal as some of the things that we usually just put in front and give to grip. So keep in mind where we're at in this study in Ephesians, because not only is all of that true, but if we don't get that concept, if we don't understand what he's teaching in the first couple chapters of Ephesians, we will miss the point of the last 3. You can't just skip the heart content or the desire level, the things that the Lord brings you, and just say, well, I'll do the right actions. I'll wear the right thing. I'll be at the right place. I'll be in church on Sundays, and I'll spend time with him in the mornings. You can't just click into a system without understanding the heart that comes in front of it that does not get initiated by you, but it gets initiated by the Lord. So that's where we're going to stay today, is saying, man, let's keep looking at our hearts, looking at salvation. The first couple chapters of Ephesians deals heavily with what the Lord does. And you get to respond and not have to initiate a lot of that. So let's dive right in. Ephesians 2, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to read the first couple of verses, and then we're going to take a quick break. So we will kind of break it up into sections here, because the way the first 10 verses are written kind of has a couple of different aspects. So we're going to break it down a little bit. So Ephesians 2, starting in verse 1. So pay attention to these first 3 verses that we're going to read, because what we're going to get to here in a minute is some tendencies that I have that I'm going to assume that at least some of you have also. So in these first 3 verses, like, can you put yourself in the position that these 3 verses speaks to. For myself, that can be really difficult because I don't view myself as that bad of a person. I kind of, I've got some stuff, didn't do some things right, wish some things had been differently. But these first 3 verses that we're about to read, they're pretty strong. But they don't deal with just actions. And so that's where I get to then not just say, I wasn't that bad. I have to look at these first 3 verses and understand what he's saying and who he's describing and see if that fits me before I have a relationship with the Lord. So verse 1, and you were dead in the trespasses and sins. Do you guys know why they define trespasses and sins as separate things? So a sin is it can be defined as I overstepped, I fell short of the perfection of God. I sinned. A trespass is intentional. I knew it, I did it anyway. And so I knew that I wasn't supposed to do this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. You guys that have kids, what's the difference when your kid, oops, you're like, hey, no problem, we'll fix that. When you tell them, hey, don't do that, and they say, no thanks, going to do that anyway. Now, that never happens in our house, to be honest. So I'm kind of hoping that the rest of you understand that our kids are behaved. I'm just going to stop. So the difference in a sin and a trespass is that, and I thought that was an interesting distinction, that this is not just aimed at people that say, oh, shoot, I meant to, but I didn't do it. This is also aimed at people that said, oh, I knew it, and I didn't. So, and you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, that's Satan, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the flesh and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. So the first 3 verses, like not a group of people that you want your teenagers to hang out with. Like those are some heavy definitions, like children of wrath, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that's at work in the sons of disobedience. I can have a difficult time seeing myself in those first 3 verses because what I want to do with my view of myself is I want to say, yeah, I have messed up. Absolutely. I'm not perfect, but man, son of disobedience, following the prince of the power of the air, that doesn't feel like me. I've tried to get it right, but I've not. But what he's going after here is something that separates us from God. Not just the way that I act, not just because I've tried to get it right, but I didn't. What we're talking about here is what it's like to be spiritually apart from God, which was all of you and was me. So we're not talking about you used to not go to church. You used to not spend enough time in the mornings, but now you do. What we're talking about is you used to be separate from the Lord. Spiritually, you were dead and you followed the prince of the power of the air. You were born with something, your flesh, that wasn't just a little out of line. You were born with something that was spiritually separate from God. So these first 3 verses are not just for the people that you think of that live in those cities that do all the things. You're like, those are the people. Those are the sons of disobedience. This is every person that has been spiritually apart from the Lord. So what happens to those? What would you do if you knew those people? If you would say, I know people that are spiritually apart from me. I've created these people, and they've been apart from me. And that's where we're going today, is saying, what does the Lord look down and see? What does he do with these people when he sees these people that are following the prince of the power of the air and walking in their own ways? What does he do? So check out verse 4. This is where we kind of switch gears. He says, here's what you were. Then he gives one verse that says, but here's what happened. And then the rest of the story is what you get to live in after you accept the invitation that we're going to talk about today, that is salvation. So in verse 4, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace, you have been saved. How much effort have you put in so far in these last couple of verses? 0. None. That's so important where we're going here. So it says, God was rich in mercy. He loved you. When you were dead, the most action that I've seen so far is us being dead. When we were dead in our trespasses, he made us alive with Christ. By grace, you've been saved and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Why? Verse 7, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, with which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So, like, as you walk through those 10 verses, like, there's like multiple really powerful punches in those verses. It says, man, here's how it was. And it wasn't just out of sync a little bit. It was sons of disobedience. It was separate. It was spiritually dead. Like the difference, Sam does a lot of work in the medical field. Sam, is there like a pretty decent difference between alive people and dead people? Mid? Like there is a difference. There's not, like Sam doesn't pull up on a scene and be like, they might be dead. Like there's a quick notation when someone is gone. It's a difference. There's a difference. And spiritually dead. So what we're trying to say here is you can't just kind of be dead. Mostly be dead. You're kind of dead, but kind of alive. There is a difference between a person that is physically alive and physically dead. And what it's displaying here in the first 3 verses, especially saying that's what we're talking about here, is not a kind of out of sync. We're talking about someone who is separated and dead. But God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us. Like, as we move forward into the rest of the conversation today about salvation, like this area right there, when it says you were dead, you knew what to do and you didn't want to do it, but God, being rich in mercy. Like, do you know what impact that verse should have on my life? Like, I hope that emotionally grips you, but what I really hope it does is it sets up a way of living that does more than just impact me emotionally on a Sunday when the right words are said and the music's played. There should be impact in my life that comes out of that sentence that says, that was me. I was a son of disobedience. I followed this, but not me. It's not like I just figured it out, but I thought of it differently. I read the right book. Like I listened to this podcast and it just like, oh, there we go. I switched gears. It was up to him. He initiated this gift that you get to receive. Like, if that doesn't take me off of every pride and arrogance streak that I have in me, I'm not sure what will. Like, I've done nothing. Like, how quick does this happen where I recognize this sentence. I say, man, but God, I was a sinner and now. Like how quick for me does that sentence change into me going right back to the things that I want to try and control, trying to manage the things that I think I can change instead of being aware of him needing to initiate. Him being the one that brings this change. I was thinking about that and I got sent this funny video recently. I'm not going to try and quote all of it, but he was talking about how quickly humanity went down the drain. Like it did not take us long. In this video, they were talking about how we couldn't, well, first of all, we couldn't make it past the first two people. And he said by the third person, we had a murderer. 33% of the world were murderers at one point. And they had this really funny way of telling the story. And so I went back and you read that story, like you barely get past creation. And they mess it up. Like they had this opportunity for perfection. And they said, no, thanks. And then you have one child and your first child turns into a murderer. Like it takes nothing for us humans to grab a hold and let our flesh run with the concept that says, you can probably figure it out. You probably don't need to understand the first 3 chapters of Ephesians. Now that we're past Ephesians, we get to look at more than they had to look at with Adam and Eve. But it is so easy for my flesh to want to grab a hold and figure out like what I can do better. Do I need to spend, I've been spending 10 minutes, maybe I spend 20 minutes, and that will unlock this connection and relationship that I know I should have. Like maybe that's not how it works. It also probably doesn't work just eliminating it. So how does it work? What do you do? Before we get there, I want to talk about grace. Jump down to verse 5. There's a couple of places that they use the word grace, and they use it in a couple of different ways. And I thought it was so cool because the word grace, like if you've heard any word in church, it's been that one. If I have recently become convinced that I understand any word as little as I thought I did, it might be grace. Like it is such an easy word to say, extend grace. And it feels like this soft, kind of like just be nice when they're not nice to you. That's part of it. In verse 5, it says, you were saved by grace. So first of all, back to, these are people that are dead, trespassing against his exact creation. Grace anyway. He says, I think you don't want that. You think you want this. You think you want what the trespasses will bring you. You don't want that. So by grace, he saves us. Then in verse 7, it says, why? It says, so that in the coming ages, he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace. So he saves you by grace so that he can show off the immeasurable riches of that grace that saved you. Like what a cool little rainbow to say he saves you anyway, not because he says, well, you're doing okay, it's not that bad. He says, I will save you by grace because you have no idea the depths, the riches, like it says here, the immeasurable riches of the grace that I have. And then it keeps right on going in verse 8. It says, for by grace you've been saved through faith, and it doubles down. It doesn't let you just kind of take that sentence and hope you figure it out. He doubles down here. He says, this is not your own doing. Like I get this feeling where he's like putting this in all caps saying, let me be very clear. You didn't do this. Because, and he explains, he says, like, if you would have done this, I know what you would do. You would boast. You would say, look at what I did. He takes away all ability here for you to make this about yourself. Like if you read these verses, you cannot make it about yourself. He says, grace saved you so that he could show you more grace. And then he says, this wasn't you. Traffic cones, not you. You would boast if you had done this because you're his workmanship. That is the tone of the first 3 chapters, saying, hey, this is not about you. This is not just something you can white knuckle and grip and get right. Do you recognize what he brings to this and what you bring to this and the disparity between those two? Like that is where we want to head in the first 3 chapters that says that exact understanding and mindset is what will enable you to then get to the chapters that say, okay, now that we understand where the Lord sits in this story and where you sit in this story, now we get to the final 3 chapters where it says, okay, now let's talk practical stuff. Let's talk instruction. Because if we miss the first part, we're going to jump right over it and go to tasks and slap a list at it, something you can check off your list in the morning, and we're going to miss exactly what he's going after. So what do you do when you reckon, because for me, this was kind of I had to think through this and try to get it on paper. So what do you do when you can kind of recognize this? Most of us, I know there's some visitors here, so I'm not putting you in the box, but most of us here in this church grew up in some sort of religious environment. Varying shades of it, but that's largely true of this church. So most of us know what it's like to live in a cycle where you throw tasks, what you wear, what you do, where you go to church, the places you go, at religion to cover up all of these things. And it's so easy to jump back for myself to say, well, if I'm not feeling connected, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Have I missed a step? Did I not check a box? Like, what is the thing that I can just grip a hold of and fix this? For me, that is like maybe that's just a humanity thing. I think it is especially true for those of us that grew up in religious environments where that is the prominent thing. So what do you do when you recognize that, when you say, I'm not connected? I'm not connecting the things that I read in the Bible. When it says, but God saved me, I'm like, that sounds good. Like, it doesn't connect with me. It doesn't change anything in my life. What do we start doing with that if you recognize that? Because that can be a difficult spot where you're like, man, I think I should recognize this, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. So how do you know if you maybe are not connecting at the heart level? So what are things that come out of the heart level that only he can bring? So let's talk like fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Like, which one of those can you guys just kill? Just knock out of the park? Like, I hit a home run on self-control this week. Like, you guys would not believe how patient I was with my kids this week. Like, you should come watch me. In fact, I have a GoPro that I wear so I can bring it and show you how patient I am with my children. Like, these things don't just well up inside me because I decide to. Oh, shoot, I wasn't bringing love to my relationship with my wife. I guess I'll do that. Like, if there is a switch that you guys know how to flip that makes that happen, I've not found it. Like, when Alana and I get sideways with each other, like, you guys kind of, I'm assuming, I know Alana and I have discussed with you guys, and we apparently fight more than most of you, but like, when we kind of get sideways with each other, there's not just like, oh, hey, let's not do that. We're like, oh, right, and we like hold hands and walk into the sunset. Like, that doesn't happen in our house. We like, you kind of get sideways and you kind of have to figure it out. And like we read a while ago, like you kind of feel that tension. You want to get back on the same page. You're not quite sure how. So you start asking each other stupid questions like, hey, when you were in the kitchen, like, was the stove still in there? Like, and you're kind of looking to kind of bridge that gap and get back to relationship. Like, I have not found where all of a sudden I like do the right thing and say, oh, wow, I love you so much. Like, I feel what I felt on my wedding day for you again because I just decided to. Like, these fruits of the Spirit don't come from me. Like, I can create space for them, and I can do things that encourage, them to become more a part of my relationship, and I can do things that discourage them. But I cannot make love well up inside of me. I cannot make peace just override the current stress that I'm feeling. I can't just force it into place. So what I naturally do, what my flesh encourages me to do when I feel that lack of peace, lack of connection, lack of love, whatever you feel, what I think it often falls on me as is behavior modification. I don't feel good, so I should probably change something about the way that I do. Or maybe Alana should change something about the way she interacts with me so that I can have peace because Alana is robbing my peace. Like, maybe that's how it works. And you go down this long list of like, what could I change? What if it doesn't start with you? Like, what if having peace in your heart, love, and all these other things we just listed, like, what if that doesn't start with you? Like, what if it starts with a journey that says, I'm missing some things. I know what it feels like to have peace in my heart. I know what it feels like to have love. I don't have it. I'm sure there's many methods to get there. I have a 3-step one. Follow me on TikTok and I will tell you how to do it. I don't have TikTok. That was a joke. So there's a 3-step quick one. It's going to you're going to recognize the verse pretty quick. So ask, seek. Anyone? Here we go. Ask, seek, knock. So what do you do when you start saying, man, I have a lack. I have a lack of something and I'd love to grip it and change it. What if you can't? So let's start back with saying these things come from the Lord. So how do I get things that I can't just create? How do I find things? So if you don't understand, to me that is the basic level one that says, I don't even understand how to get this back. Like when Alana and I get sideways with each other, I'm not even quite sure. I can't put my finger out and say, this is what we're missing. Like, this is how we got sideways. That's usually pretty clear. But, like, what is the thing in our relationship now that I would say, if this was like this, then it would be good? I don't know. But I know that that's not what I want. And I don't understand how to get it back. So we start by asking. Start by asking. If you are currently in a space today that you're saying, I don't have this love, joy, peace, I don't even know how to get. This is how we start, is we start by asking. We say, I don't even understand. Lord, like, I know that there are things that I should have from you, fruits of the Spirit, that I feel like I don't even have. I can't even see, much less have flowing out of me. We start by saying, I don't even understand. So we ask. Next part is seek. So we start by asking, saying, this is up to you. Like, would you make this well up in me? Show me. Pull anything into the light that's stopping the fruits of the Spirit from growing and flowing out of me. And then we seek. We seek not because we think that if we seek hard enough or long enough, that the time is what makes it come alive. But it sure doesn't make it come alive if you do none of it. It's not about the activity or the lack of activity. So we ask and we seek and we say, I know that everything that I need is contained here. It's contained in the book. It's contained in relationship with the Lord. So I ask him for it, for things that I can't come up with, and I seek. And I say, Lord, show me. Show me. Like, I'm willing. I know that the things that you can make come to life in me are worth, like, putting in the time. Not just so that I get like a breather, the relief, but when the recognition comes and it says, I believe that what you bring is worth me asking, seeking, and knocking. Not just so that I get relief, but because your ways work. And all of these fruits of the Spirit come from you. We sang this morning, we said, for from you are all things, and to you are all things. So as soon as I make it about myself and my behaviors and the task that I want to change to make this feel better, I have missed the heart of the gospel. So how does salvation work? It is initiated by him, accepted by you, and cannot be earned by you working your way. Now, we've talked a lot about how the heart works, how to get that relationship. If you don't have it, how to start asking. I actually want to take a bit of time this morning because we're talking about salvation, to actually just walk through the gospel story. Like, I've told Alana, I don't know if there's anything I love teaching, laying out, just giving as an opportunity more than the basic gospel. Because if there is one thing that you cannot miss of all the things that we try to teach and all the different ways that we try to weave this story together or make it a good invitation that you guys would love to partake in, like, we cannot miss the gospel. Everything that we talk about and all the ways we try to explain it and say, look at this and look at that, it all comes back to not just one story, it comes back to the story. So I wanted to take just like a little bit of time and walk through the story of the gospel that you guys have heard often. But if there's one story and with one thing you cannot miss, it's this story. So for you adults that have heard it 40 times, 400 times, listen up anyway. For you kids, if you guys have ever wondered, like, I know Jesus died and I'm not quite sure why, I would love for you guys to tune in and I will try to explain it as best as I can. I'm not going to hit every single point because there's such a cool story. Like, you can go so far back and walk through so much prophecy and so many things lining up and like crazy stories along the way. We're gonna hit the high points this morning. And if you guys, any of you, especially if any of you have never like understood it or didn't quite get it, I'd love to sit down with you and your parents or by yourself or whatever and say, what questions do we have about the gospel? Because if there's one thing we won't miss, it's this story. Okay, so we're going to start really quickly back at the beginning. So God created the earth, right? You guys have heard that 1,000 times. God creates the earth. puts people on it. And what happens? Immediately, they hit lunchtime, they have some apples, and everything get kicked out of the garden, right? And all of a sudden, God says, I will put enmity between you. So all of a sudden, there's separation. There's him saying, no more in the garden. Kicks them out of the garden like hard work. Sweat, tears, pain, all of the hard things come into play. So then you enter into like a long bunch of years of hard days, pain, sweat, working up the ground, slavery, prophecy, God's people waiting for someone like this big ruler is going to come, and they start talking about, they start hearing prophecies, and they know that at some point, this really impressive, powerful guy, this military man, is going to come down and lead his people. So then there's this young lady, this Virgin Mary, who hears from an angel. And this angel says, you're going to have a baby. You're going to have a baby. It's going to be kind of controversial. Because in that, I mean, I wish it wasn't as normal as it is in our world today. But back then especially, this is a deal. Like for a lady that's not married to have a baby, that's a problem. So this angel says, you're going to have a baby. And he explains to her who this baby's going to be. And so this baby comes and is born in a teeny tiny, in a dirty stable. And he doesn't come with power. He doesn't come in with a sword and start showing his dominance. He doesn't come in and start killing off the people that were persecuting his own people. He comes in a stable, like the dirtiest place that you could possibly be born. Of all the comforts that he could have afforded, that was not one of them. And so starts the story of the upside-down gospel that doesn't make sense to you and didn't make sense to them. And so this baby is born. And he grows up. And for only a couple of years, he starts to lead this ragtag group of disciples. And he teaches them, and he shows them a new way. He says, man, you've heard all these things. I know you've been taught the law. He says, I'm going to teach you a new way of thinking about it. And he did for them exactly what he still does for you, which is go after your heart. He cuts right past the things that you do really well and the things that you don't do well at. He says, I'm not here to, can I talk about what matters? And he gets down to your heart. So Jesus leads this group, and he starts this revival. And he's viewed pretty critically. He's not exactly just welcomed with open arms because they recognize the gift that he's bringing. He faces all kinds of persecution. He tells his followers pretty straightforwardly, when he would invite people to follow him, he didn't make it sound rosy. Hey, I've got this really cool gig. You should check it out. When people would say, I want to follow you, he would go like, I don't even have a place to stay. Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want? So Jesus walks through that couple of years, and the persecution and the contempt and the people around him that hate what he's doing start to get to be even a little more intense. And Jesus knows that because of the sin, Jesus knows that there's a price that needs to be paid for that sin. For the sin that was awake back then and happening at that moment, the sin that had happened before he walked on earth, and for every sin that every one of you have ever committed, and every person that will ever commit any sin, there was a price that had to be paid. So Jesus heads towards the end of his ministry, and he prays his Father. He says, Father, if it's possible, take this cup away from me, but your will, not mine. So Jesus gets persecuted unjustly, unfairly, and he gets crucified. Crucified, I know most of you kids know this, that is up on a wooden cross like you've seen with nails driven through his hands and driven through his feet. Have you guys ever gotten a splinter? You guys ever poked your hand on something? Like, think of that. I saw someone just wince their teeth. That's about right. So he opens his hands, and he takes what he knows it takes to pay for the sin that was and is and ever will be. Jesus dies. And even the centurion, a Roman, someone who was not on Jesus' team, when Jesus dies and the veil tears and he says, surely this was the Son of God. Like, what have we done? But like God always does, he takes something evil, something that they meant to end a ministry, something that they meant to end someone who was bringing something different than what they wanted, and he turns it into something good. So Jesus dies. Like, what emotion would you feel at that time if you believed, if you actually were one of the few that believed in his movement, and now he dies? And you would be questioning some things like, man, was I misled? So Jesus dies. 3 days later, they go to the tomb, and the stone is gone, and he's gone. Jesus comes back and just blows away every expectation that they had for him. And he sets up this incredible invitation. He says, I have died because there was sin that had to be paid for. Now, there's an opportunity. And this is the part where you get to have some action. You don't have to white knuckle. You don't have to make it a little bit better or clean up before he'll extend that invitation. That invitation is dirty and messy and wide open. Wide open. John 3:16 says that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Like, it starts with him, and it ends with his grace and his gift. And that grace and that gift is exactly what is open to all of you, not just as a one-time thing, not just as I've never accepted that gift. Absolutely. If that's something that you need to do, you need to do that. Please do that. But it is also a continual invitation for you to align your heart with what was done for you and the gift that it was for you. Not because you did it, not because of works, because if you did that, you would boast. This is a gift that you get to accept for the first time and then every day after that. And you get to recognize that what you were given was not just abilities and talent. You don't have just behavior modification tactics. You have the ability to ask, seek, and knock, and trust your Father with the gift that he is giving you. And everything we're going to continue talking about in Ephesians after this Sunday always comes back to this story. It always comes back to the gospel. It always says, do you remember? This is why. This is why we teach Ephesians. This is why we have Sunday school. This is why we have church in a community, because we want to, like he said at his Last Supper, remember. And so we want to do that here. Easter's coming up. We're going to have communion. We're going to do it for real. But we also remember, not just in an emotional one-time, oh my goodness, that was so cool, and now I live from that experience for months and months. But there's a continual invitation to know the story of the gospel and for it to impact the way that you live your life. The way that you love your wife, the way that you have patience with your children, the way that you run your business. Like, the story of the gospel reaches to every corner. But it's an invitation. It's not a demand. You don't have to do it. So the invitation comes from him, and you get to accept or not. I listened to Justin's podcast he put on the church chat the other day. I thought it was really, because this is what was in my mind, and so I got to hear a piece of what they talked about, kind of in that frame of salvation. They talked about citizenship, because they were talking about Iranians and Americans and Pakistanis. I mean, they were talking about all these different people from different places. And they talked about citizenship. And they said, you know, that at some point, they said, you know, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. Right now, it's an invitation and a choice. At some point, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Scripture says it. That's what's going to happen. And your citizenship will transfer from American or Iranian or wherever you're from, and your citizen will transfer based on this choice. And so salvation offers you not only a chance to accept the gift of salvation, but also a chance to accept your citizenship. I thought that was a really cool way to think about when they were talking about citizenship, like your salvation is a gift that's given you to also accept your true citizenship that you will have for longer than you will have your American or other citizenship. Salvation starts with him. It's initiated by him. It's up to you to accept. And like, what a gift. Like, it's so easy to think about the one time, like the time you pray the prayer, you're like, why would you not pray? Absolutely. But then I get a few years down the road, and I don't live my life understanding the story of the gospel and how it impacted me anymore. The daily decisions and the disciplines and the things that we're going to talk about practically in Ephesians have to come after the recognition of the story of the gospel and the way that it lands on me. So we're going to keep moving in Ephesians, but not without forgetting the story of the gospel and how it leads us to the rest of this. Next Sunday, we're actually going to do something a little different. We're doing something called Hope Story Sunday. And so what we're going to do is sit down with Sam and Jen. They're going to be our guinea pig kickoff couple. And the reason we're kind of interjecting it here in the middle of Ephesians is because, before I knew that I was going to teach this session here on salvation out of Ephesians 2, Sam and Jen, I actually sent them something to read in preparation for Hope Story Sunday that was coming. And it was Ephesians 2. I didn't plan that. Because I told them, I said, the verse 4 where it says, but God, like you were this way, but God. And then it keeps on going. I told them that represents exactly what I want to talk about with them next Sunday on Hope Story Sunday, is saying, man, you guys, your lives were one way, but God, like, tell us the story. Tell us the story. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with Sam and Jen and the rest of you next Sunday, and we want to hear from them. It was this way, but God, and now. I hope that is I have been encouraged having not even that much conversation with them, but it's already, I can see the story of the gospel happening. And it's not because Sam and Jen are these incredible people that have really knocked the gospel out of the park. Like, they would be the first to tell you that the gospel goes first. And they get to accept what the gospel offers. It's not because Sam and Jen really killed it and you guys and I can't do that. They get to accept verse 4 that says, but God. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for this morning. You are good. And you write stories that are unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you for the way that you go first. The way that you don't allow me to make it about myself and the things that I can just clock in a different direction a little bit. God, you make those houses fall flat. Thank you. Like my flesh is constantly trying to build houses that aren't founded. I don't have foundation on you. Like, God, thank you for not letting those houses stand. God, would you continually, just in the way that you work solidly with truth, bring the way that you give these opportunities and these invitations into salvation and into living the way that you have drawn it up. Would you make that alive in our hearts? And God, if it's not, would you help us to just start by asking why? Seeking and asking you for that. God, give us courage as we look at our lives, pull everything into the light, and see what you say about it. Like no door closed, no corner that we won't allow you into. Like, would you give us the courage and the community around us? Friends that speak life and sharpen and say, I think there's something that you should take a look at here, and us to receive it. God, would you grant us with that? Thank you for loving us. Thank you for helping us build houses that last. Father, it's in your name I pray. Amen. Kids, you guys can grab some trash and head to class. Yeah, I don't see my kids. Okay, we'll take just like a couple of minutes here. If you guys want to, if we have something to talk about, we'll talk. If not, we're going to call it a day and head for Lindo. What do you guys want to, you guys have anything? Phil and Shelly, is that where you guys are going? I see you going. What do you guys have to say? Do you guys have any thoughts? Any corrections, anything that came to your mind? If so, we'll take just a couple of minutes here. If you have them, if not, we'll be done.
Something that comes to my mind every time is, I think, for those of us that have accepted the gift of salvation, we get sideways when we think that the passions of the flesh are bad instead of good. Like, the flesh doesn't care if it's bad or good. It just wants you to do it on your own effort. What you mentioned was, you said continually align your heart